The leather chair squeaked as James Harrison leaned back, examining me like I was an inconvenient typo in his morning reports. His new nameplate gleamed on the desk. Director of Global Operations, Maxwell Industries, the position I'd been unofficially doing for the past 3 years. Look, Olivia, he said, dragging out my name like it was something distasteful. The fact is, your role here has become redundant. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, face neutral. Behind him, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what used to be my office, London's financial district sparkled in the morning sun. The same view I'd looked at every day while building Maxwell's international client portfolio from 2 accounts to 27. Redundant? I repeated softly. He smiled, the kind of smile that never touches the eyes. Let's be honest. You were David's secretary who got lucky. He let you handle some client interactions, make some decisions. Very progressive of him. But now that he's retired, I'm the senior account manager for our top 5 clients, I corrected, including Rothschild Global. Harrison waved his hand dismissively. Titles are just titles. The reality is, we need someone with real executive experience. Someone who understands global operations at a fundamental level. Someone like you. I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. Exactly? He didn't even catch the sarcasm. I've spent 15 years in operations, MBA from Harvard. Summer home in the Hamptons. I know how to talk to these people. These people, like the CFO of Rothschild Global, wasn't the daughter of Nigerian immigrants. Like the CEO of Zhang Technologies, didn't prefer meeting in hole-in-the-wall dumpling shops instead of fancy restaurants. Our clients have specific expectations. I tried one last time. Relationships built over years. Oh, don't worry about that, Harrison cut in. I've already scheduled meetings with all the major accounts. Once they see the new direction we're taking, they'll understand. Business is business, after all. I thought about the weekly calls I had with Sarah Adenuga at Rothschild. About our shared love of true crime podcasts and the recipes we exchanged. About how I'd attended her daughter's graduation last month. When? I asked simply. Effective immediately. He slid a folder across the desk. HR has prepared a generous severance package. 2 months' salary, standard NDA, letter of recommendation. Though between us, he winked. With your limited qualifications, you might want to look at smaller firms. Or maybe go back to being a regular secretary. The words hit like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I thought about the email I'd received last night from Michael Zhang, confirming our private dinner next week to discuss expanding their contract to $50 million annually. The dinner Harrison didn't know about. I'll need to inform the clients, I said. No need. We'll handle all communications. Clean break, you understand. In fact, he glanced at his watch. Security is waiting to escort you out. Standard procedure. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt. Of course. Though you might want to review the client communication protocols. He frowned. The what? The individual communication preferences each client has specified in their contract. They're quite particular about how they receive updates and who they'll speak with. Harrison's frown deepened. That's hardly necessary. I'll just have my assistant. Your choice, I shrugged, picking up my bag. Though you might want to check Section 7.3 of the Rothschild Agreement, the part about designated points of contact. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. I'm sure it's all standard boilerplate. I smiled, remembering the clause I personally negotiated with Rothschild's legal team last year. The one that specified all strategic communications had to go through their designated account manager. Me. Good luck, Mr. Harrison. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Security was waiting outside, 2 guards looking distinctly uncomfortable. They'd worked with me for years, seen me stay late, arrive early, build something from nothing. Sorry about this, Ms. Walker, Jim, the senior guard, muttered. It's fine, I assured him. Just doing your job. As we walked to my desk, people peeked over cubicle walls and around corners. The news had spread fast. I kept my head high as I packed my personal items into a cardboard box. The family photo. The small jade plant I kept alive for 3 years. The handwritten thank you note from Michael Zhang after I'd helped his company navigate a crucial merger. What Harrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment since the day his appointment was announced. I'd seen it in his eyes during our first meeting, the way he looked past me while I briefed him on our major accounts. The way he'd interrupted me to ask if his coffee could be reheated. My phone buzzed as I waited for the elevator. A message from Sarah at Rothschild. Weekly strategy call tomorrow at 9 a.m. London time, as usual. Don't be late. I smiled, thinking about Harrison trying to handle that call. Sarah, who refused to speak to anyone she hadn't personally vetted. Sarah, who had made it clear when signing their $30 million contract that I was the reason Rothschild chose Maxwell Industries. Another buzz. Michael Jean. Dinner still on for next week, flying in from Hong Kong specially. I didn't respond to either message. Instead, I let security escort me through the lobby, past the marble columns and sprawling reception desk where I'd started as a temp secretary 7 years ago. Outside, London's morning rush was in full swing. I took a deep breath of city air, car exhaust, coffee shops, possibility. Need a cab, Ms. Walker? Jim asked. No thanks, I said, hefting my box. I think I'll walk. As I turned toward Bank Station, my phone buzzed again. An email from Maxwell's legal team reminding me about the NDA's confidentiality provisions. I almost laughed. They thought the NDA would protect them, that it would keep me quiet, make me disappear. What they didn't understand was that I didn't need to say anything. The clients would do all the talking for me. At home, in my small but immaculate flat in Greenwich, I set my box of belongings on the kitchen counter and opened my personal laptop. Not the company machine. I'd left that behind, wiped clean of everything except work files. This computer contained something far more valuable, my private database of client interactions, preferences, and relationships. Not confidential company information. I was too careful for that. But the personal details that made business relationships work, the kind of details Harrison would never think to ask about. Like how Sarah from Rothschild was deathly allergic to shellfish, making Harrison's planned dinner at that new seafood restaurant a potential disaster. Or how Michael Jean always scheduled important meetings for Tuesday because it was his late mother's favorite day. Or how the CEO of their third largest client, Frederick Larson, refused to do video calls before 11 a.m. his time because he had a standing breakfast date with his teenage daughter. These weren't trade secrets. They were human connections, the kind that couldn't be documented in any CRM system or passed along in any handover notes. My phone buzzed again. A message from Diana Chen, my former mentor who'd left Maxwell 2 years ago to start her own consulting firm. Heard what happened. Let me know when you're ready to talk about Plan B. Plan B. We discussed it months ago, when Harrison's appointment was first announced. I dismissed it then, still believing that competence and results would matter more than politics and prejudice. I should have known better. Opening my email, I began drafting a careful message to Sarah at Rothschild. Nothing about being fired. Harrison could handle that announcement himself. Just a brief note about my personal email address and phone number, in case you need to reach me. I did the same for Michael Jean, Frederick Larson, and the other key clients I cultivated over the years. No complaints, no accusations, just information they might find useful. Then I settled in to wait. The next morning would bring Harrison's first real test. The weekly strategy call with Rothschild Global. The one where Sarah Adenuga expected detailed updates on 6 different initiatives. The one that required intimate knowledge of their operations, their goals, their concerns. The one that Harrison didn't even know existed. As I made dinner, pasta with the pesto Sarah had taught me to make, I thought about Harrison sitting in my old office, probably already planning how to restructure the client relationships I built, how to make them fit his idea of how business should work. My phone buzzed one last time. A calendar invite from Diana. Breakfast tomorrow, after the fireworks. I accepted with a smile, then set my phone aside and enjoyed my dinner in peace. Tomorrow would be interesting enough without worrying about it tonight. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's simply stepping aside and letting reality do the work for you. And reality was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. I was already settled at Diana's favorite cafe in Covent Garden when my phone lit up at exactly 9:01 a.m. Right on schedule. Good morning, Ms. Walker. Sarah Adenuga's crisp Nigerian-British accent was unmistakable. I just had the most fascinating interaction with your replacement. I stirred my coffee slowly. Oh? Indeed, he seemed quite surprised when I asked about the Thomson merger implications. Even more surprised when I mentioned the regulatory compliance updates we discussed last week. But do you know what truly shocked him? What's that? When I informed him that our contract explicitly requires all strategic communications to be handled by our designated account manager, the one listed by name in Section 7.3, I could picture Harrison's face, the slow realization dawning as he frantically flipped through contract pages. He's currently scrambling to find the document, Sarah continued, amusement clear in her voice. I've put the call on hold. Been waiting for 6 minutes now. Deanna arrived at our table, raising an eyebrow at my phone conversation. That sounds challenging, I said neutrally. Olivia, Sarah's voice turned serious. What happened? I believe Mr. Harrison is implementing his vision for the company's future, one that doesn't include certain, redundant elements. A sharp intake of breath. He didn't. He did. Yesterday afternoon. That absolute fool. Sarah's tone could have frozen the Thames. Well, he's about to have a very educational morning. I've already emailed their board. My phone buzzed with another incoming call. Michael Jean. Sarah, I should go. Other calls coming in. Of course. Dinner next week. My treat. We have much to discuss. I switched calls just as Leanna's coffee arrived. Olivia. Michael's voice was animated. I just tried to reach you at the office. They said you're no longer with the company. Some new director tried to tell me he'd be handling our account personally. He didn't even know about our expansion plans. Yes, Mr. Harrison has taken over global operations. Harrison? Michael snorted. The one who spent our only meeting talking about his Hamptons house and Harvard MBA. Please, I'm canceling next week's dinner and the contract discussion. That's your prerogative, I said carefully, mindful of my NDA. It's more than that. I've got calls into 3 other firms. Ones that understand the value of relationships over resumes. A pause. Any of them you'd recommend? Before I could answer, another call beeped through. Frederick Larson. The next 2 hours were a blur of calls and messages. Every major client I'd cultivated. Every relationship I'd built, reaching out one after another. Not just checking on me, but actively pulling away from Maxwell Industries. Diana sat quietly, occasionally sliding pastries toward me as she watched the drama unfold. At 11:23 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Jim in security. Board members arriving. Emergency meeting called. Harrison looks like he's seen a ghost. I could imagine the scene unfolding in the Maxwell offices. The mounting crisis as client after client either refused to speak with Harrison or explicitly threatened to take their business elsewhere. The dawning realization that I hadn't just managed accounts. I built relationships that went far deeper than quarterly reports and profit margins. Time for Plan B. Diana asked as I finally set down my phone. I nodded. Tell me more about your consulting firm. She smiled, pulling out a sleek folder. We've been waiting for you. Corner office, full autonomy, and a chance to build something new. Something better. Won't Maxwell's NDA be a problem? Actually, she slid a document across the table. I had our lawyers review it. The NDA prevents you from sharing confidential company information. It doesn't prevent you from accepting clients who choose to follow you, especially if they make that choice without any solicitation on your part. My phone buzzed again. An email from Maxwell's board secretary. Emergency meeting scheduled for 3 p.m. Your presence is requested. Call details attached. Deanna raised an eyebrow. Going to accept. I thought about Harrison probably pacing in my old office, watching his grand plans crumble. About the board members, finally realizing what they'd allowed to happen. Of course, I said, opening my laptop. It would be rude to refuse. At 2:55 p.m., I logged into the video call from Diana's office. One by one, faces appeared on screen. Board members I'd briefed countless times. Harrison, his tie slightly askew, eyes darting nervously. And in the center square, Charles Maxwell himself, the company's founder, pulled back from semi-retirement for this crisis. Ms. Walker, Charles began without preamble. We find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. I waited silently. This morning we received formal notifications from 6 major clients, representing over $120 million in annual contracts. They've all indicated their intent to terminate their relationships with Maxwell Industries, citing concerns about account management changes. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Additionally, Charles continued, we've received a rather pointed letter from Rothschild Global's legal team regarding breach of contract. Specifically, Section 7.3 of their service agreement. The designated account manager clause, I said helpfully. Indeed, Charles's eyes narrowed. A clause that, upon review, appears in various forms in all our major client contracts. Clauses that specifically name you as the required point of contact. Harrison's face had gone from red to pale. Sir, if I had known. Yes, Mr. Harrison. If you had known. If you had bothered to review the contracts. If you had taken 5 minutes to understand the relationships Ms. Walker built instead of assuming her role was, what was the word? Redundant? The silence was deafening. Ms. Walker, Charles turned back to me. We would like to offer you your position back, with a significant increase in both compensation and authority. Full directorship, board seat, whatever you require. I smiled gently. That's very generous, Charles. But I've actually just accepted another position. Name your price, Harrison burst out. Whatever they're offering, we'll double it. It's not about the money, Mr. Harrison. It never was. It was about respect. About understanding that business isn't just titles and MBAs. It's relationships. Trust. The kind of things you can't buy with a summer home in the Hamptons. Charles nodded slowly. Diana Chen's firm? Yes. She's been trying to poach you for 2 years. And now she has. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. I should mention, I've received several calls from clients today. I haven't responded to any of their business inquiries, of course. That would violate my NDA. Harrison made a choking sound. Of course, Charles said dryly, and I suppose once your garden leave ends, I'll be free to respond to any inquiries that may come my way, purely coincidentally. The board members exchanged glances. They knew, just as I did, what would happen next. The clients wouldn't just leave Maxwell. They would follow me to Diana's firm. Not because I asked them to, but because they wanted to. Is there nothing we can do to change your mind? Charles asked quietly. I thought about Harrison's smirk as he dismissed me, about all the times I've been underestimated, overlooked, assumed to be just a secretary. I'm afraid not. But I wish you all the best, especially you, Mr. Harrison. I'm sure you'll do fine once you learn how to reheat your own coffee. I ended the call before anyone could respond. Diana was waiting outside her office. Well, I believe I'm officially unemployed. For about 30 more seconds. She grinned, holding up a contract. Ready to become a partner at Cheng Global Consulting. I took the contract, thinking about all the possibilities ahead. About building something new, something that valued substance over status, relationships over resumes. Partner and head of global strategy, I read from the title page. Well, Diana smirked. We couldn't very well call you a secretary, could we? My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Sarah at Rothschild. Just terminated our contract with Maxwell. Such a shame. I don't suppose you'll be taking on new clients soon. I looked at Diana, who nodded encouragingly. Give me 2 weeks, I typed back. I'm about to start something new. Something much better than revenge. Something that would show everyone exactly who they'd underestimated. And Harrison? He was about to learn the hardest lesson in business. Sometimes the person you dismiss as just a secretary is actually the one running the whole show. He just hadn't figured it out in time. 6 months after walking out of Maxwell Industries, I stood in front of Cheng Global Consulting's newly expanded London office, watching our logo being installed on the building's facade. In the reflection of the glass doors, I could see Maxwell's building several blocks away. They'd recently laid off 30% of their staff. Admiring the view, Diana appeared beside me, 2 coffee cups in hand. Or just enjoying the irony? I accepted the coffee with a smile. Both, maybe. Did you see the news this morning? About Harrison's resignation. Hard to miss. Though resignation seems generous when you're asked to leave by unanimous board vote. The headline had been diplomatic. Maxwell Industries announces leadership changes amid continued client exodus. The reality was far more brutal. After losing over $200 million in contracts in 6 months, the board had finally had enough. Sarah sent me the internal numbers, I said, sipping my coffee. They're down 68% in global operations revenue. Diana whistled. Turns out relationships matter more than Harvard MBAs. Who knew? We walked into the building together, passing through the bustling reception area. In half a year, Cheng Global had grown from a boutique consulting firm to a major player in international business strategy. Our client list read like a who's who of global commerce, with Rothschild Global and Zhang Technologies leading the pack. My new office, earned, not taken, occupied the corner of the 18th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city I'd helped reshape, one client relationship at a time. But unlike Harrison's sterile domain, my space reflected actual work. Whiteboards covered in strategy notes, a conference table perpetually surrounded by chairs, and most importantly, an open-door policy that made every employee feel welcome. Morning, Olivia. Jessica, my new assistant, appeared with the day's schedule. I'd insisted on hiring her away from Maxwell's reception desk, recognizing the same hunger for growth I'd once had. Thanks, Jess. Still on for your strategy training this afternoon? She beamed. Unlike Maxwell, Chen Global had a clear advancement path for everyone, regardless of their starting position. Jessica was already handling junior client interactions, building her own network of relationships. Wouldn't miss it. Oh, and Michael Zhang sent over the final contract revision. He's added 2 more subsidiaries to our portfolio. I nodded, remembering the dinner where Michael had officially moved his business to Chen Global. He'd insisted on hosting at the same dumpling shop where we'd first discussed his company's international expansion 3 years ago. Your success isn't surprising, he'd said over steaming Jiao Longbao. You understand that business is about people, not just profits. My phone buzzed. A message from Charles Maxwell himself. Got a minute to talk. Deanna, reading over my shoulder, raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Going to take it. Of course. I settled behind my desk, activated the speakerphone. Charles, how are you? Surviving. He sounded tired. Though I suspect you know exactly how we're doing. I hear things occasionally. Things. He chuckled without humor. Like how our entire Asia-Pacific division followed Zhang Technologies out the door. Or how Rothschild just canceled their last remaining contract. I stayed silent, letting him continue. The board asked me to reach out, one last time. We're prepared to offer you full control of global operations. Carte blanche to rebuild however you see fit. That's very generous, I said carefully. But I'm happy where I am. So I gathered. A pause. We should have seen it, what Harrison couldn't understand. What I couldn't understand until it was too late. And what's that? That the strength of a business isn't in its organizational charts or its fancy titles. It's in its relationships, its people. Another pause. The ones we dismissed as just anything, secretaries, assistants, support staff. I thought about Jessica, already showing the same instincts that had helped me build my client portfolio. About Jim from security, who now headed our facilities team, treating every employee and visitor with the respect that built lasting loyalty. It's an expensive lesson, I said finally. Yes, his voice turned thoughtful. I don't suppose Chen Global would be interested in acquiring what's left of Maxwell's Global Operations division. Now it was my turn to pause. I'll bring it up with Diana, though any deal would require significant restructuring. Of course, he sounded relieved just to have the conversation. We could discuss it over dinner perhaps. That Italian place you always recommended, but I was too busy to try. I'll have Jessica set something up. After we hung up, Diana burst out laughing. Are we really going to buy out Maxwell's division? Maybe, I smiled. At the right price, with the right changes. The rest of the day passed in a blur of client calls, strategy sessions, and mentoring meetings. I made a point of knowing every employee's name, their aspirations, their potential. No one was just anything at Chen Global. At 6 p.m., as I was reviewing the next day's presentations, Sarah from Rothschild stopped by. She'd flown in specially for tomorrow's board meeting, my first as Chen Global's newest managing partner. Quite a view, she said, looking out over London. Better than your old office. Different perspective, I agreed, though I learned a lot from that view too. She turned, studying me thoughtfully. When Harrison first told me you were gone, he said you were just a secretary who'd gotten lucky. That real leadership required a certain pedigree. And now? Now he's updating his LinkedIn profile while you're building an empire, she smiled. Karma has a peculiar sense of humor. Later that evening, after most of the office had cleared out, I found Jessica still at her desk, studying client reports. Learning the patterns? I asked. She looked up, slightly embarrassed. just trying to understand how you do it. Build these relationships that last. I sat down beside her desk, remembering all the late nights I'd spent doing exactly the same thing. Want to know the secret? I pointed to the client file she was reading. It's not about their business metrics or their market position. It's about remembering that their daughter just started university, that they're training for a marathon, that they prefer Earl Grey to English breakfast tea. Human details, she said thoughtfully. Exactly, because at the end of the day, business isn't about companies. It's about people. And people remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you actually did. My phone buzzed one final time, a news alert. Maxwell Industries stock had dropped another 15% on Harrison's departure announcement. Jessica saw the headline and smiled sympathetically. Do you ever feel bad about what happened to them? I thought about Harrison's dismissive smirk, about all the times I've been overlooked and underestimated, about the lesson that needed to be learned. No, I said honestly. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. Besides, I gestured around at our thriving office. We built something better. The next morning, I arrived early to prepare for the board meeting. The agenda included our expansion plans, including the possible Maxwell acquisition. But more importantly, it included our new employee development program, ensuring that no one would ever be dismissed as just anything again. As I set up my presentation, I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. It showed my first day as a temp secretary at Maxwell Industries, young and uncertain but determined. I kept it as a reminder not of where I'd started, but of how far I'd come. My phone lit up with a message from Diana, ready to show them what just a secretary can really do. I smiled, straightening my jacket and gathering my materials. The boardroom would be full of industry leaders, major clients, and institutional investors. All of them there to hear my vision for the future. A future where titles didn't define potential, where relationships mattered more than resumes, where success was measured not by who you could dismiss, but by who you could lift up. More than ready, I typed back. Because the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's building something so right that their mistakes become irrelevant. And that's exactly what we did.